And shout out to Doug's Beardsley from Kadena. This is going to be a recreation of one of his speeches that he did at DecentralCon Miami. Link will be down in the description if you guys want to watch the original video. I recommend it. So what is the blockchain trilemma? In order to increase speed, you normally have to sacrifice security or decentralization. If you want to increase decentralization, you normally have to sacrifice speed or security. No blockchain has been able to achieve all three. They consider it to be the holy trinity of blockchains. So roughly speaking, all single chain layer 1 proof of work blockchains all have the same performance. They all have the same fundamental limitations: the speed of light, the network bandwidth, and then transaction execution times. Roughly speaking, in blockchains like Bitcoin, we have seen 5 TPS. Now there are some that can do 10, some that can do 15, but I'm going to use 5 in this presentation because it's a general number that a majority of the community agrees upon. So Kadena took a completely different approach to scaling. Kadena created what is called a multi-core blockchain. Just like your computers use multiple cores to process data, Kadena's blockchain uses multiple cores to process transactions. So if you have one blockchain and that one blockchain can process up to 5 transactions per second, to assume that if we had 2 blockchains running side by side and each blockchain could process 5 transactions per second, together combined, they could both process 10 transactions per second. With 3 blockchains running side by side in parallel, you would assume 5 transactions per chain. You could do 15 transactions per second. 5 blockchains, 25 transactions per second. 10 blockchains, 50 transactions per second, etc., etc. Now, this naive approach has 2 challenges. Number 1, 10 separate blockchains would give you 10 separate currencies. And number 2, a 51% attack would become a 5.1% attack. Problem number 1 being when you are running 10 different blockchains separately that do not share the hash from the previous blockchain, you would then inherently have 10 separate cryptocurrencies. You would also run into the inherent problem that the 51% attack becomes a 5.1% attack because you can attack just one chain and all you need is more than 50% of the hash power on that chain, and that makes sharding an unsecure and unacceptable problem. But there is a solution. What if we braided the chains together? Here is what it might look like with 2 chains. Each blockchain includes the hash from the previous block on the previous chain, in addition to the normal blockchains that include the hash from the previous block in the most recent block that's being mined. If you wait for 1 block after your transaction, it would require the attacker to have the full hash power of both chains to do a 51% attack on that block. So what does this mean? Hash braiding allows Kadena to perform trustless cross-chain transfers, yielding a single currency across multiple chains. So the way that you can transfer coins from one chain to the next is you burn them on the current chain, then you submit proof that the coins were burned, then you recreate them on the next chain. But what if we want to connect more than 3 chains? How can we actually scale further? So if we swing back over here and we take a look at this previous diagram, and then if we collapse that previous diagram and we only look at one layer, you can see that both chains here are connected. Now, if you wanted to connect 10 chains together, there are a lot of ways that you could do this. The graph that you're seeing here on the screen is one potential approach. Now, this approach is great because it is the fastest and you are only 1 hop away from the closest chain. And that's great because it gives you the fastest cross-chain transfers. But that would require you to store 9 separate hashes in each individual block. And that's unacceptable because the size requirements will be too large. And if you were going to scale up from there, it would only get worse. So the thing here that saved the day for Kadena is graph theory. Graph theory is an obscure branch of math, and they have been studying the degree diameter problem for decades, and that's exactly what Kadena used to solve this problem. Now here is what it looks like to connect 10 chains together using a graph theory solution. This graph, if you look at it closely, gives you 2 hops to the furthest chain. No 2 nodes are ever more than 2 hops from each other, and it only requires 3 extra hashes per block. So this is a great solution, and this is exactly what Kadena used when they got started and they launched their blockchain with 10 individual blockchains all braided together. But what if they wanted to scale up farther? Here is what it looks like when you scale up to 20 chains. The only difference between this and the previous graph is that you are now 3 hops away from the farthest chain, but they are still only including 3 extra hashes per block, so the size requirements did not increase. So what does that actually mean? Number 1, that means that you have reasonable size and space requirements to scale, and that now Kadena can perform fast cross-chain transfers. But the question you're gonna ask is, what about more than 20 chains? And this is where the graph theory solution to the degree diameter problem comes into play. This table shows a summary of the best solutions. If we have 5 hashes and 5 hops, we can get to hundreds of chains. If we have 6 hashes and 6 hops, we can get to thousands of chains. If we have 7 hashes and 7 hops, we can get to tens of thousands of chains. And if we have 8 hashes and 8 hops, we can get to hundreds of thousands of chains. So what does that actually mean? That means that the architecture of the network is no longer the limiting factor.
Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back. Tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something. That's why I ain't calling.